Welcome back. If I'm counting right, this is day 3 of my new system, in which every day I analyze my Lichess Rapid game from the night before, I play a puzzle rush, and then if I have time, I do a third thing. In this video, I'm going to analyze the game I played last night on Lichess. If I remember right, I won this. Oh yeah, this was the short one. Okay, you can see from the graph here that my opponent made a pretty good mistake there, and I won. So this shouldn't take that long. I did get the white pieces again, and I played the English again. This is my 3rd or 4th time now, so I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with it. This opponent responded with knight to f6, and I'm pretty sure here I can play g3 or knight to f3 or knight to c3, and I'm going to be fine. Looks like d4 is also good. I think that transposes into the Indian defense, if I'm not mistaken. So right now we're in the English opening Anglo-Indian, but if I play d4, yeah, we transpose to a d4 opening. Okay. Well, I've played a lot of d4 openings, so I didn't want to do that, but I played g3. My opponent played their best move, which is e5. I played knight to c3 here, which... I mean, it just generally guards the center and, gets behind this pawn. Kind of the same thing that I did in d4 openings. You want, the knight to be behind the c-pawn rather than in front of it, at least in my experience. My opponent played their absolute best move here, which is to pin that knight. And since I've played g3, I put the bishop on g2 to fianchetto it. I'm getting close to being ready to castle. However, I don't want to put the knight here just yet because then they can attack it. My opponent's next move isn't listed as a mistake, but it's not one of the top 5 here. I wonder if it's very common. Knight to c6 is pretty common, but right now castling is by far the most common move in the Masters database. In the Lichess database, it's most common to take here or castle or play knight to c6. So, I mean, knight to c6 is fairly common here, and we're still, well within even the Masters database. No problems so far. I played my only inaccuracy of the game here, which was e3. Okay, since I am still learning the opening, I'm going to pay a little bit of attention to this. The reason that I did it is because, again, I didn't want to put the knight in the path of this pawn, so I wanted to put the knight here behind the e-pawn, and of course, then the 2 knights would be protecting each other. But it looks like my best move is knight to d5. Stockfish thinks that my opponent will castle whether I play knight to d5, knight to f3, or d3. Well, I wasn't going to play d3 because then the knight's truly pinned. Right now, the knight's not pinned. But if I play d3... yeah, it says they would castle either way. I don't know. I do get knight to d5, I guess. It attacks the bishop, but it also attacks that knight. I don't know if they would castle or not, but I'll try to keep that in mind since we are in a position that has been reached before. Looks like almost 300,000 games on Lichess have reached this position, so that's quite a few. Okay, e3 is the most common move by white here, followed by knight to f3, a3, d3. Knight to d5 is not nearly as common, only about... I think about 10% of these games. All right, well, it's possible I'll reach that position again, so I will try to keep that in mind. But anyway, I did play this, again, because I wanted to put the knight behind the e-pawn. It's their best move to take here. My opponent played d6, which was inaccurate, and now I should play knight to d5. Okay, but my second best move is knight g to e2, which was my whole idea. I'm ready to castle. My opponent has a bunch of choices, but they played an inaccuracy. I'm not sure why that's inaccurate. It's developing a piece. They only have 1 piece left to develop, and then they can castle to either side. I still have a bishop that hasn't developed yet, and my queen, so my opponent's actually slightly ahead of me on development. So I don't know why that's bad. It's only bad if I play knight to d5. Well, here I did play knight to d5. I don't remember my exact thought process or how much time I spent on it. Let's see how much time I spent on that. I spent some time on this. I spent 19 seconds according to the clock. I thought about this move. That's a lot of time for me to spend on one move in a rapid game, especially right here near the end of the opening, getting close toward the middle game. One thing I had to have noticed is that I have 2 pieces guarding that square, the pawn and the bishop. So here I'm going in here. If they take back with either their knight or their bishop, I'm going to put a pawn there, and then they're going to have pieces in trouble, right? It wouldn't be a pawn fork if they took with the bishop, I guess. I would take with the pawn, their knight would be in trouble, their knight would have to move, and then I could castle, so I'm not sure why it's that big of a deal, but I played it. Now, this was my opponent's only blunder of the game, and yeah, as I just said, if they took back with the bishop, I would take with the pawn, and they would only have 1 piece in trouble, but if they take with the knight and I take with the pawn, then that's a pawn fork. I honestly thought they were going to take with the bishop, and then I would take back, and they would be left with this bishop doing nothing out here, and I could castle, and we'd be on our way. But when they took back with the knight, I was pretty sure that was bad, and I think I pre-moved this because I was going to take back with the pawn either way if they took. So I did, I took here, and no time came off the clock. But now they're going to lose a piece no matter what. And just backing up, if you're in my opponent's situation here, recommended moves by Stockfish or to move this bishop back, so I guess so I don't take it. Or castling, and it says I wouldn't take that, but I might. Or bishop to d7, that's, sliding this one back here. Don't know exactly why that would be great. Bishop to g4. Now it says in that case I would take the bishop. That's interesting. If they played the other move, like castling or dropping this bishop back, I would not take the bishop. But if they move this bishop out here, I would take the bishop. Okay, again, I'm not sure exactly what the difference is. Or queen to d7. Yes, adding protection here and here, but then that takes protection off the knight. It says if they played queen to d7, I would castle. I think if they played queen to d7, I would take this knight, which would mess up their pawn structure over here. But I don't know, that might have been bad. But anyway, that was their blunder, was allowing the pawn fork, and I get it, it's not a beginner blunder, it's intermediate, because you had to see that the result of that would be losing a piece. Interestingly, the engine says just take the pawn with the bishop, or drop the bishop back. That's weird. The engine can't decide if it wants to save the bishop and lose the knight, or give up the bishop for a pawn, and then I would of course take. And then they still would drop their other bishop back to a5. According to that line, I'm not sure why. They played their third best move, which is here. I'm not sure exactly what that's aiming at, but that does allow me to take a piece. It is not my best move to take a piece. Wow. Would you look at that? It's my best move to play a3, which drives this bishop back, and then I would play b4, and they would push the bishop back again, and then I would take the knight. My second best move is queen to a4, which pins the knight. And it says they would pull this bishop back here then, and then in that case, I would take the bishop, not the knight. Okay, that's a lot of different choices here. I thought, I've already got this pawn here. I better go ahead and take, which is my third and fourth best moves, is to take either one of those pieces. It's still +4. I don't remember how I made this choice or how much time I spent on it. Let's see, how much time did I spend on deciding which piece to take? I spent 7 seconds. That's about average for me in a rapid game. I think the reason that I took here is because it would damage the pawn structure. If I took the bishop, they can take with the queen, and then their pawn structure is intact. My pawn structure is already a little messed up here because, obviously I've moved this pawn over that way. So anyway, I took the knight, and they took back. And here, as soon as I made my next move, I realized I had a pretty awesome thing right here. I should have taken the pawn with check. Oh, that's my third best move, or second best. That's what I should have done. When they moved the king out of check, whether blocking with the bishop or moving out of check, then of course I would get the rook for a bishop. This engine again says a3 is my best move. I think I made the mistake here of moving too quickly. I didn't even stop to look. I just assumed they would take back with the pawn, and then I was going to castle to get out of this pin right here. So I moved in 1 second, I castled. And as soon as I did it, I saw that was probably better, but I'm up +3 and my opponent resigned, or almost +4. But yeah, it came down to right here. They should have just left that alone, dropped the bishop back now so they don't have to worry about the a pawn, or castled, or put this bishop back here. That I wouldn't have seen. I think if I was my opponent, I would have castled here. I don't know that I would have seen that or known why this one was important. Oh wow, the engine thinks I would play a3 anyway, no matter what they did. Well, that's fascinating. But anyway, this one went pretty well. Again, it all came down to this one opponent mistake, which allowed the pawn fork. I don't have anything to learn from my end of it, except that last move. I shouldn't have moved that quickly on that move when I castled. I had a lot of time. I knew I was a piece ahead, down a pawn, but up a knight. There's no touch rule in online chess, so I could have, had my finger on the king ready to castle, but then looked around a second. I'm still working on that. I'm still learning. Just take your time, especially if you're pretty sure you're ahead. I did see the queen pointed here, but I don't think I was worried about it. I think I was more worried about this pin here, and that I have, 2 pieces undeveloped that can't really move. But I guess that should have helped me to play a3 rather than castling. But again, I had planned on castling, and so I was just too quick to do it. Let's learn to look for those. And also, I need to pay more attention. A3 is in most of these lines, not that one. But you saw that how often a3 showed up in, those various situations here. I often leave a piece here when I should just chase it off. All right, well, thank you for spending your time here. If you play the English and have any tips for me, since like I said, this is just my second, third, maybe fourth time, feel free to let me know in the comments. And I'll see you next time.